everyone, this is Pim. Welcome to another episode of the show. For this episode, we have a very special guest. We have someone from our friends at CrowdStrike. Welcome to the show, Nicole Senna.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Pim. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, okay. So, Nicole, before we dive into that deal, like you have a background within other businesses as well, right? I think before CrowdStrike Security with an I at the end. Good friends of us here at MEDDICC as well. Isn't that the first company where you came across MEDDICC?
Yes. So actually, ironically enough, I had started my BDR career at Palo Alto Networks, was there for about 2 months until I ended up going to a startup called Security AI, really focused heavily on the data privacy, security, and governance industry and space. So there at Security AI, I was introduced to MEDDPICC, had met Andy. He taught our whole sales company the methodology and the framework behind it. And me being at the infancy in my career, I believe I was about 22, 23. So just being able to learn that as a BDR really, really helped me out. And to this day, it's been an immense impact in the way that I do my work. So
yeah, I love that. And the transition from BDR into an AE role that you have now is interesting. We didn't talk about this at all in any of our prep calls previously, but can you give us a flavor of how this helped you transition into your current role?
Absolutely. So being a BDR at Security and learning MEDDPICC, being able to come to CrowdStrike as an account executive, you're still doing all the prospecting and doing that strategic outreach. I think for me, the most important thing is having that hierarchical outreach. You don't want to reach out to somebody who, again, maybe doesn't have necessarily the juice. You want to go for more along the lines of the directors, the VPs, the heads of IT, even the CIOs, because typically along the lines, especially, in today's day and age, the CFOs have a lot of say in terms of being the economic buyer and signing off on a cybersecurity project, especially since that's such a huge part of a company's infrastructure, right? Really learning MEDDPICC at the infancy of my BDR career further helped me as an account executive, again, to just be able to build out that hierarchical reach and reach out to prospects that I know really will have the capability of being my champion, building out that champion and gaining that trust throughout the whole deal cycle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For me, I immediately start thinking, this is just covering value, stakeholders, and process really well in a BDR context. And ultimately, you take that into your next role as an AE, right?
Yes.
And in your introduction, you said it already, you're an AE specifically for the SMB space, right?
I am.
And I think that there's a little bit of a question sometimes, we see it with prospects that we get to work with, hey, how does MEDDICC, or all things MEDDICC, relate to SMB sales, right? Because sales cycles are typically shorter. You could argue that it isn't as complex as selling to a true enterprise where MEDDICC kind of got created many years ago. And so the question really is, typically being asked there, is MEDDICC for SMB sales as well? I think today we're answering that question once again, because we always say, yes, it is, because you're still doing professional customer engagement and professional selling. And that is what MEDDPICC does really well. It underpins that. It gives you something to focus on the right things in the right deals, to do value messaging, to proactively influence decision criteria and all those things. So in that context, I'm really excited to have you on specifically from that SMB perspective as well.
Yeah, I was going to say MEDDPICC, it's equal across all functions and sectors within a business. But I would say it's almost most importantly within SMB, just because you don't have a lot of people that you are working with. So being able to ensure that, again, you're gaining the trust of your champion, having that relationship, making sure that you're basically in lockstep, right? You have syncs with your champion and you make sure that you're just never losing contact with them. And multi-threading, I know you've talked about that in the previous podcast, just being able to get all the right resources, at the beginning of the opportunity is really crucial, because at the time in my career, I, was pretty green in my sales career. So again, just being able to have my manager with me and then learn forefront from him further enabled me to then take it down that road in future opportunities. So it was a really eye-opening experience, and I'm really excited to talk more about it today.
Love that. Are we giving a shout out to Cosmo here?
Yes, Cosmo Wilson. Best leader ever.
Yeah, I love that. So, hey, this deal, like, if you take it back to the beginning, like, how did it come about? What was the pain that you guys kind of like identified that got this evaluation going all the way at the beginning?
Originally came in as a deal reg, and my champion at the company that we're talking about, the opportunity, he was actually already a previous CrowdStrike customer. So he had purchased Falcon Complete, which is our 24/7 managed detection and response service offering. And the cool thing about this opportunity was my champion, he had come to this hospitality group pretty much because their current CIO had absolutely no idea what was going on in terms of the IT infrastructure. So my champion, he came in here with a strategic roadmap to essentially just figure out what do we need to do to save money, consolidate our platform, and overall get a better, robust security platform. And essentially what had happened there, we had three really big pain points. One, it was high cost. So my champion, he was very adamant about saving the money, or excuse me, saving the organization money as a long-term ROI. And then the competitor that, and their current incumbent at the time that we were going head to head at, they were very known for multiple acquisitions and multiple point products that were more necessarily stitched together. So really lacking that visibility and efficacy to have a holistic solution. And then the third, it was the fact that they were really blacked out of their MSSP, but they still had to perform things like platform maintenance and things like that. So it was like they weren't getting full visibility. So how am I supposed to really get the job done in full when I don't necessarily have full access to what I am currently using in terms of a solution? So it was definitely cost, consolidation, and being able to not get black box and essentially be fully protected while also still getting access to a console.
Right. And you mentioned like an incumbent solution, right? What's the compelling event kind of driving all this? An expiring contract, or what's the kind of the thing that made them take action right then and there?
Yeah. So February 7th was actually or February 1st was the first day that we actually had talked with our champion at the organization. And it was a 7-month long deal cycle. So the reason why we had met so early on in the process was because we knew he was coming in because he had expected plans to double in growth within 3 years. So being able to continuously scale out the company was one, definitely a compelling event, but two, we had to ensure that we had enough time to really be able to prove out the value of CrowdStrike and ensure we're really exceeding on all their decision criteria as to what they were looking for in a holistic security solution.
Hey, so Nicole, you mentioned your champion, your main champion in this deal a couple of times. Was this the typical role that you would see in your deals? The typical persona?
Yes, I would say he came in as the head of IT, and then he ended up getting promoted to the CIO just because when he came into the company originally, he had surpassed the CIO. So it makes sense to see how he eventually had gotten promoted. In terms of other deals in SMB, I would say really the most important people that you would want to at least have conversations with are directors of IT, sometimes even senior IT managers, VPs. I would say the C-level executives, while they do have a good understanding of the overall cybersecurity infrastructure, I feel like it's really more the directors and the managers in IT and information security that really see it firsthand as to what they truly need. So that's again why it's so important to get C-level executives on the call. And my champion, he had actually directly reported to the CEO and the CFO being the economic buyer. So we had known in terms of pricing, just as long as we get to the pricing that we need to. He was very adamant about not sharing pricing. But just being able to have that, or knowing that he had that relationship, was great for me. Just being able to ensure, okay, we've got our champion, we've got our economic buyer. As long as we come within the ballpark numbers that they're looking to, achieve, that we can help save them money long term, in addition to obviously being able to consolidate all their products and, help improve identity, which is something that they didn't have before. That was really crucial. So I would say C-level executives are really important. You want to have those relationships, but I feel like directors and VPs are the ones who are really day-to-day in the technology itself and know exactly what the true pain is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're spot on there. And if we look at like champions, like we tend to think in plural champions, right?
Yep.
To make sure that we don't rely on just one person, because like what happens if they leave or something happens, they change roles or whatever, you want to build in redundancy, right? And we also always say, at least that's how we think about it. It's like a champion is not a champion by definition. They start out as a contact. Then you can see whether they have the traits of a champion, and then you can build them up, test them, etc. And I guess in this case, like having someone as a previous customer coming in, if you've had a successful relationship from the past, is probably as good as a starting point there that you can have, right? But it's still not a foregone conclusion that that person will act as your champion again and ultimately be that person that, sells on your behalf when you're not there, coaches you on how to win, gets you the introduction to the CFO, your economic buyer in this case. So can you talk us through kind of like that journey with your champion and when you knew like, okay, they are effectively our qualified champion now?
Yeah, absolutely, Pim. I didn't want to be the one to say we can do this, we can do that, but maybe not deliver on what those outcomes were. So it was really important for me early on to understand and hear from him exactly what they're looking for. He, early on in the process, like I was saying, he was so adamant about pricing. He did not share pricing. He would just keep telling us, get as low as you can. So I think for me, that was really one of the biggest struggles, just because you really want to have at least something to gauge off of, right? Because it's like, I want to earn your business, but I think, being in cybersecurity and the solutions that we offer, you really can only go so low, right? But throughout the opportunity, being able to have, again, being in lockstep with the champion and having those syncs on a weekly basis, I would say I definitely knew he was my champion, honestly, by like the first call, just because he was so adamant about being able to onboard CrowdStrike, but making sure we get his team involved as well, just to see the value that we could potentially bring, as well as the additional support. Again, being able to have those ad hoc syncs with him, whether it was 15 minutes, 5 minutes, being able to walk through the whole process, whether it was procurement, legal, figuring that out. I would definitely say we were able to establish him as a champion early on, but it was just a matter of being able to come in with the right pricing, being able to convey our message that, we're here for you in terms of your consolidation approach. We're giving you more at even a lesser cost. And as you continuously scale and double the growth of your company, we want to be here to earn that business and grow with you. So, he really did appreciate that. And that's why I feel, so grateful from the start to the end. It was a pretty successful, relationship that we had built. And at the end of it, I know he was very happy and willing to do an actual potential protector series spotlight for us. So, that at the end of the day, when you're in sales, if you can have one of your opportunities and champions be a reference for you, I think that's the biggest win that you can have as a sales rep.
Yeah, spot on. And the protector spotlight is like a case study and reference case, right? Just for clarity.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate
We
the
still got to
internal
get
lingo.
that up, but yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, awesome. And so prior to talking about like your champion validation and qualification journey here, you touched upon decision criteria. And so if we think about this opportunity, we talked about the initial pain that you identified, the compelling event tied to it. Now we talked about having a champion, so not selling in the dark, right? And slowly but certainly getting the insight that you need as part of your mutual evaluation. You touched upon decision criteria, like I mentioned, and here's how you make the how of mobilizing the value, and the why CrowdStrike. That's where you make it specific, right? So can you talk us through like how you and the team went about, influencing, solidifying, and locking in decision criteria with this hospitality group?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, in terms of decision criteria, again, one being support and having that consolidation approach. So with the CrowdStrike MDR, you are having the CrowdStrike solution backed up by our CrowdStrike personnel itself. So, there's not multiple tiers or multiple levels of support that you would have to go through. So some of the I know metrics I was telling you associated with some of the decision criteria, which was being able to consolidate, but also add on some additional modules, that being the identity and cloud security pieces. We were able to save them over 20 hours a month in platform maintenance. And, now they have the ability to have a fully robust managed platform in addition to fully managed identities, fully managed cloud security on a single UI. So instead of having to manage multiple different, like 3 different UIs or consoles, and then having to access 2 different teams of support, whether it being their MSSP and the current competitor incumbent that they had in place. So I would say being able to associate that decision criteria with the metrics was really important for me. So now, instead of 3 consoles, they just have one, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're spot on. And the way that we want to think about metrics, and I know that as businesses, like between you and me, we agree on this, right, by way of the partnership that we have. But if you think about any good M1, so the story about the quantified value that you've successfully delivered for a customer previously, it has to be armed with decision criteria, not to leave the door open for like your next rival to come in and say, like, yeah, I can do that too, and I could probably do it cheaper or faster or whatever it may be, right? So it's those 2 things are always going to be interlinked with each other. And I liked that you immediately got behind just the technical decision criteria as well, right? Because that's like table stakes. And I think the power of any real good product is that you that you can have the economic impact as well, which is more than just pricing, right? And so yeah, that's awesome to hear. So hey, Nicole, so like the later phases of this sales cycle, getting you should be getting ahead of the paper process. But in prep, you mentioned that there's something interesting about the paper process and what happened during like the final stages of this deal. Can you talk us through?
Yeah, absolutely, Pim. So one of the most definitely interesting things that had happened toward the end of our opportunity was the fact that once we were getting toward the procurement paper legal process of things, we had sent over our MPA, which is also known as our T's and C's, and we had been redlining it for probably, 2 to 3 months back and forth. And so right when we were at the finish line, literally the last day that the opportunity could have been closed to avoid that gap of their renewal coming up, we got a call from our champion. He had told us there were some internal politics going around because he had figured out that one of his head IT members was putting a halt on the process within the legal team to tell them to not sign the MPA so that it would come close enough to their renewal where they could keep their current incumbent, just because that internal competition, while we did meet with them multiple times, like I was telling you, Pim, we had met with the team at least 4 to 5 times a month throughout the whole 7-month deal cycle, but he did see the value in CrowdStrike. But I think at the end of the day, just being the fact that he had been over the company for more than 5 years, my champion had just came to this company brand new, basically wanting to rip and replace everything that they had, and didn't settle well with him. He obviously would have rather kept the incumbent as well as the MSSP support that he had already had an established relationship with, right? So like I was saying, that day we got a call from our champion. Turns out internal politics happened. And then he told us, I'm going to get the MPA signed today. I'm going to get it sent over to you. Get me that quote out. We'll have the PO sent. And literally within hours, what we had been waiting for, I would say 3 weeks, just like that, off of a phone call. And so that really was an eye-opener for me, because you have to ensure that internal competitions don't get in the way of an opportunity as big as this one, or at least being able to, again, have that relationship with your champion, to at least call them and be like, hey, what's up? Like, I feel like this has been, sitting there for a while. Is there anything I need to do? Anything that we need to do together to help speed up this process? I know your renewal's coming up in 15 days. You wanted at least 2 weeks to be able to deploy out the new endpoint. So, that's another eye-opening experience for me that I could have learned upon to just take that one step further and reach out to him. But it worked out, and I am so incredibly grateful for that. So internal competitions, they're a real thing, but being able to work around them in a very professional manner is so important.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, because there are quite a few lessons in this, right? And obviously this came out the right way, but there's the opportunity to learn and grow from this regardless of the result. Because like what you're telling us there is like, hey, we had competition in, well, either inertia in staying with the status quo or like reinvesting with a rival. And so that category of competition had a champion as well. And then the question becomes, is like, who has the more powerful champion? And this is the way that you want to think about stakeholders as well, right? And it seems as like your champion would definitely win that battle, but that's not a foregone conclusion, right? Especially if they are new to a business. And when someone has been part of, deciding upon the current solution in place, and they are attached to that investment as well, they don't want to see it go down, right? Because that's like their stamp on it, and they are kind of vested into that. So that's super interesting, and I think for you and your team, definitely something to be wary of. So you can be super proud of the way it played out right now, but at the same time, you want to keep it as a lens to be sharp on these things going forward, I suppose. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And, Pim, the biggest thing about this opportunity is I had only been at CrowdStrike 4 months, right? And so this was such an eye-opening opportunity for me. I had learned so much just because, like I had said earlier, I was at the infancy in my sales career. And so one thing I think for me was really important to learn was equal business stature and building that confidence, because just because this person has been doing it, in the industry for 20, 30 plus years, and I had only been doing it for 4 months, it was intimidating. It absolutely was. But just being able to have that confidence in myself, being able to get my manager involved on every single call, and then learning from him and the way that he would just be able to articulately speak everything through, it was awesome. I learned a lot, and I am incredibly grateful for that, because I think that one opportunity, just in terms of, MEDDPICC itself, being able to apply it then and apply it in the future. It's just like peeling back the onion. That's something that I feel like I can always continuously learn on.
No, Nicole, like that's spot on. I mean, if you just go back to the beginning of our conversation, from SDR to AE, and whether you're like a year into your career or 20 years to your example, like the learning never stops, right? So I think like the growth mindset that you described there should be something that everyone strives to have. I know that I still learn things every day, and I probably will for the rest of my life, right? And so in the context of this conversation, you talking about like your BDR role at security, your current AE role, and kind of like the things you've learned and the way that you've used MEDDPICC. What is like your single biggest learning with the common language that we refer to when we talk about MEDDPICC that you've had today? Like the single biggest learning.
Single biggest learning I feel like I've applied both in my sales career and in MEDDPICC is to really just have a conversational approach. It's not a script at the end of the day. You're just having a conversation with somebody, and being able, again, like I said, peel back the onion and asking them questions tailored to exactly what they're potentially looking for, and then ways that we can help them. In SMB, M1 metrics and M2 metrics are crucial. Just being able to prove out, this is how we've helped an organization in a similar relevant industry. Is this something that you're also dealing with today? If so, this is how we could potentially help. And then being able to take those M1 metrics, applying to their own M2 metrics. And then again, you're just like creating a path of success by being able to curate, all this context and the way we've been able to help each individual opportunity. So then in the future, when, there's another organization that maybe has this particular security stack or these particular challenges, we can then further relate that versus just, going off, not even just a script. I don't want to say that, but just throwing up PowerPoints or just talking all about CrowdStrike. Because at the end of the day, yeah, CrowdStrike, it's great. I'm glad you're here. But really, what are you here for and how can I help you? Because this will then, if you tell me everything, that'll help me help you. And that's, my goal at the end of the day is to earn your business and understand really, how we can help and how I can relay previous stories and, champions. And again, the reference call, like I was telling you too, a biggest win as a sales rep for me is just being able to have that reference of a previous champion you had been able to win, an opportunity with.
Yeah, the spotlight, right?
Yeah.
Was that it? Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. I also think that you're spot on because M1s and then ultimately bridging them to M2s. And then once you are successful in selling to that customer in M3, the mutual goals that you have once they are live with your solution, they empower you to have this foundation to talk about value connected to the right stakeholders and ultimately run your process more successfully, right? So I think you're absolutely spot on. And as we are talking about the things we've learned, the things that we get better at constantly, what is something where you feel like you and maybe the team as well, but you specifically to begin with, should focus on and maybe will focus on to raise the bar further as you go into the rest of your fiscal year?
Yeah. So personally, I would say, two things I can definitely work on is, are metrics and decision criteria. I think sometimes when you're working with SMB organizations, maybe, they don't necessarily know exactly, what they would be looking for. Sometimes they just evaluate because their AVs really are doing the job. They haven't got breached. There's nothing, wrong. So for me, that's where I struggle because it's like, you know, it's hard to be able to justify the cost of a solution that's 2-3 times the price when you don't really see the value as to what you'd be getting from it if everything is good today. So I would say being able to truly ask questions geared toward understanding contextualized decision criteria to then gain metrics from the criteria that they're sharing with me. I feel like they play really well with each other. So personally, that's something I definitely feel like I need to work on. And procurement, I think in SMB is so crucial too. Being able to understand, are there any, legal processes we need to get ahead of? So then whenever we're ready to go ahead and sign at the end of the month, oh, nope, our legal team wants the NPA or NDA in place. And so just being able to get ahead of all of that, at the beginning, the first or second call, right? So for me, I would say that's the most important is metrics and decision criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, I really resonate with that. Something that you said there is like your customers, they don't necessarily always know what they might be looking for. And I think that is something that gets overlooked sometimes because at the end of the day, whether you are like a head of IT or a CIO, like it's certainly part of your job, but it's probably not the main part to always be out there buying technology. They're not a professional CrowdStrike buyer or even like an IT buyer in general at the very core of their role. And you can argue that in your line of business, in your segment, it's a little bit more the case than in others, but still, right? If you're running a hospitality business, you're probably more focused around like the ultimate experience that your guests will have or something, right? And so the thing that you want to, I think, keep in mind is the fact that you're a professional seller. And so with what metrics and decision criteria do really well is articulate the value that you can deliver for someone and specifically how, so that people can get educated. So, and to your point just a minute ago, and once help you do that in a contextual way, in a story way, so that people can start seeing the vision that you're giving them and ultimately reach consensus on it and help them start to build and buy into their version of that story for it to become a reality. And I think that is what your champion saw from experience. But if you don't have that kind of person come in as a previous customer, and then one can be extremely effective in helping you do that, right?
Absolutely. And he had actually asked for a reference call, and I remember he wanted a POV as well. But I think just because the timeline of things and just the whole paper process was getting in the way, I believe like right toward the end, he was just ready to go, just because he had known how, we had operated in the past and it was a successful operation. So he wasn't hesitant about that. But again, we wanted to test it out and let his own team be able to see it work in live performance. But just because of the timing of everything, he didn't even get the reference call. He didn't do the POV. So I thought that was pretty interesting. What makes somebody want a reference call and a POV? I had the reference call set up for him. He just never called. So sometimes I wonder, why would you go in thinking I want these two things, but then maybe fall back and not go for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if I had to guess in this case, it's from previous experience versus following the procedures of buying at that time new company, I suppose, right? But
right.
It's definitely good to cover all your bases and actively influence relationship decision criteria as well, which is what you're effectively doing if you're setting them up to speak with other customers that you've made successful, right? Nicole, time is running away from us. I really enjoyed having you on the show, but we will wrap up now. Thank you so much, and let's stay in touch. See if the records that you set with this hospitality customer gets broken, hopefully by yourself, and then we have something new to talk about. How about that?
I love it. Thank you so much, Pim. It's honestly, it's such an honor to be here. I absolutely love listening to your podcast and watching Andy on LinkedIn as well, and just being at the Madmen as well. Y'all are awesome. So I appreciate everything, and thank you so much for having me today.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Nicole. And this was another episode of the show. Thanks for tuning in. And with that, see you next time.